And we are live with our 202nd episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. I know we've tweeted out a fair bit about a guest today, but apparently there's some technical difficulties and some other things going on. So we will be winging it a little bit today as we talk through a number of other things. We've always got a laundry list of items, and as everyone knows, AppSec is fairly dynamic, and so we'll get into some other stuff today. First things first, there are still some slots available for KernelCon training in a few weeks. And this is a great opportunity to get practical secure code review under your belt, look at some code. Ken and I were running through the updates this last week for the course. I'm super excited about the changes that we are making and some of the new introductions that we're pushing into the course. Just new stories. I mean, it's been a couple of years since we came up kind of with the flow and the stories and everything that went into it. So of course there's new stuff that's popped up and new examples that we can throw into it, as well as new code. And we've got a better idea of how to actually do that because we've given it a few times. So it's a good opportunity, first public course in a while, and come support KernelCon if you can. Otherwise, I'm not sure what has happened to Haseeb, so we are going to talk about some other things. We'll start out with a tweet that popped up from Jason Haddix yesterday. But before we get into that, Ken, was there anything else that you wanted to, that you wanted to mention before we jump into it?
I'm trying to think. No, there's nothing I can think of off the top of my head. So,
yeah. Ken's getting distracted by other things, so that's fine.
No, you know what it is, man. I got a phone call. So this is clever.
Inevitable.
I told you what I'm waiting for
Yep.
service at the house I'm selling, right? And they took that as an opportunity to call me. And of course I have to respond because like any minute they could go over there. I don't know. It's like an impromptu emergency thing. They took that as a time to call me from their number to try and resell me on re-upping my maintenance plan with them. So that's yeah,
of course.
That was why I jumped on that call. I thought it was an emergency. Instead it was a sales call. So anyways, all right. So back to not being distracted. No, I don't really have anything to add. I mean, you've covered it. We're doing KernelCon training. We have more training coming out. You and I are working on some things, but I don't really want to talk about too many of those things until we're actually live. How about the sponsorship packet? We've had that built for a while. Are we like ready to distribute that, or are we close, or?
Yeah, we're close. And that, I mean, I forgot to, that's a good call out, right? Like, obviously Ken and I are not like, we haven't done sponsors in the past. So that's a new thing that's up and coming. The current episodes are sponsored by Redpoint Security, and there will be other opportunities for others to actually come in and sponsor as well. Redpointsecurity.com for code security and application security consulting. Yeah, but that should be live. I know you and I just need to push that out to the website. I think we've got the numbers dialed in, and it'll be interesting to see, who wants to sponsor and all of that. Yeah. Other than that, the main thing that we wanted to start with was a good thread on the Twitters, right, from Jason Haddix this last week, right? I mean, I'll jump into it first of all, right? The question that he asked is new school skill sets for AppSec testers. Jason's a good friend. We've known him for years, and he's been on the podcast at least once, maybe twice. I can't remember at this point. It might be time to have him back on. But he asks about the evolving skills needed for AppSec, right? If you still want to remain a testers, what skills should people add? So you're currently in the space. What is it that you do to stay up to date, or what are the skills that you are looking for or you're trying to maintain? And I know you had a good, laundry list that you posted, but what was your initial take there?
Actually, I think I wanted to talk about what you posted because
okay,
you mentioned graph
GraphQL.
What?
Yes. So I have a tendency to respond on Twitter with like, this is what's in front of my face right now. This has been an interesting like research project. I think in general, there's there's always new stuff that pops up, right? And I think you jumped in to try to address that. My response to that was GraphQL. I've seen more and more GraphQL endpoints pop up over the past probably 3 years, 4 years. More and more apps that interact with it. You know, your SPA, your single page applications that interact with an API. And I understand the developer want and need to use GraphQL because it allows you to ask for everything that you need, similar to a database, and get that back all in a single response, right? You can query and mutate at the same time. There's all sorts of advantages to it. But my initial take was you as a tester need to understand GraphQL and how to manipulate GraphQL. And that's from, hey, I'm doing a penetration test or I'm doing an application security assessment, a source code review, and want to understand the nuances of how to query, what authorization actually goes into accessing data for this application. But the custom queries and the ability to create custom queries and mutations for GraphQL is going to pay dividends the more testing that you do. Part of me wants to dive back out, if I had more time, dive back into the bug bounty world and actually just look at GraphQL endpoints, because it's such an interesting space, the way the edge cases exists in GraphQL. So like when you make a query, the authorization rules can be written in such a way that maybe they only apply to the first like level of queries and not to the secondary ones or tertiary, or like, the way that you can embed query upon query upon query inside of GraphQL makes things super interesting. And you can create these kind of never ending loops inside of a query to perform denial of service. And that's kind of the easy one. But now I'm going all into, GraphQL specifics, Ken. But understanding like the APIs that applications interact with, I think is probably the better, or the summary of what that is. GraphQL being one of the major ones.
I don't think you went too far into it. I'd actually add that so obviously as part of what I'm building at Dry Run, doing a lot of like kind of interviews of different developers and environments and things of that nature. Also, probably lesser obvious is that I still do review code often, right, for various folks. So to stay relevant. So why bring that up? It's becoming very clear to me that RESTful API endpoints are being converted to GraphQL API endpoints. When I saw it the first time, and you know what I'm referencing, Seth, when I saw it the first time, I was like, oh, because usually, I've seen it such that REST and GraphQL are supported, but that was the first time I've seen just a complete replacement of REST. Well, lately, as I've been doing these interviews, people are moving more to GraphQL and less away from REST and more towards GraphQL, which is pretty interesting for a number of reasons. Obviously, the traditional HTTP request we would craft, components of that still work, still uses the put, patch, post, delete, all that kind of HTTP method stuff, still has the same general structure in terms of having headers and then a body, right? Mm-hmm. The body itself being very different though, right? That's the actual, like you said, a query and a mutation. And from my understanding, a query is more like, sending GET request to an endpoint, and mutations are more like state changing actions like post, put, patch, delete kind of stuff. Wow. So having done some homework on how authorization works in the GraphQL libraries that you can include into your framework, I realized that there is a lot, just like there is with RESTful endpoints, there is a lot of room for flexibility in how you implement authorization. And unless you pay for, because like the GraphQL Ruby one, for instance, has like a pro version where then you have some ways to hook like existing authorization libraries in, like can or I forget actually, I'll just say can because I can't even remember right now, like the other options they listed to plug into. In any case, people aren't, I mean, anyways, I don't know if people are using that too heavily. I definitely know I have seen custom authorization schemas built, and that's really when you get yourself into some trouble. So the two major points I think I would summarize all that tangent with, my incoherent tangent, would be we're converting REST to GraphQL more and more frequently. So it is even though the body of the request looks different, how the internals occur, like how parameters and how values are taken and how authorization is performed and all of that, that's like, there are definitely nuances that are going to be very different from like a RESTful API. And so you have to like get up to speed on that, and probably very quick. So if you're not looking into GraphQL, look into it. The other second part to that, primarily being that, like I said, it's kind of the Wild West right now. So we know it's going into use, and we know it's kind of the Wild West right now in terms of vulnerabilities. So I agree with GraphQL being a big part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like Haseeb has joined, so I'll add him to the stream here shortly. I like it. It's interesting from a code perspective when we start talking about GraphQL and about authorization, right? Like where authorization is actually implemented. And I do feel like it's kind of changed the location of that, right? Like more of a, we're closer to the data is where the authorizations need to occur, right? Or the authorization checks, where it used to be that we could be right on the surface. And when we, depending on what they're asking for, but those queries get so complex that it's very, very difficult to actually implement.
Yeah, well, and because of how GraphQL is implemented and how much like inheritance and abstraction magic is occurring, then what you really see is like the opportunity for authorization to be placed in so many different places, right? And I mean, it's not even standard in where authorization gets applied. Like what I mean by that is, I'll continue with the GraphQL Ruby version there. In a typical Rails application, the decorators are done in a very specific way. There are before action that occurs inside of a controller file. That's like, boom, easy story to understand. Always going to look like that. Very rare that it won't look like that. That is not at all the case for GraphQL. Like that authorization, how it looks, like there's no specific rhyme or reason, right? It's just how you decided to implement it. It could be on a per mutation, per query basis. It could be that you've grouped your mutations and queries by logical sort of business function, and then that maps to a specific level of access you would need, and then that's gets applied to that unit of those GraphQL mutations and queries. I mean, it's crazy to me. That is the one that I'm like, man, good luck. Like, good luck.
The conversion,
really know that in and out.
Yep. The conversion is where, and that's what I'm saying, right? Like, the traditional like decorator or the traditional attribute that you could use for authorization check, it does not necessarily apply in the same way because you just don't understand what they're asking for at that level when you first come into an application, like one of those Rails applications that we were just looking at. As it goes deeper, you've got to get closer to the data. That's what I was trying to iterate there. So
sweet.
But take a look at that, right? Like I know there's other things as far as like what people should keep up to date on, and maybe with that we'll also ask Haseeb. Sorry about that, Haseeb. From Ifani here, what his thoughts are on, staying relevant, right? And specifically in the mobile space. But first of all, I'd like to introduce Haseeb. Awan, am I saying that right, Haseeb?
That's right. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Good. From Ifani Secure, and if you've looked into Ifani before, they are a mobile security company that protects against SIM swapping and a few other things. But I don't want to dive too much into it. Since we have you here, Haseeb, we may as well ask you about your background, first of all, how you got into mobile security, and then what your take is on staying relevant in that space.
In cybersecurity or mobile industry at all?
Let's stick with mobile, right? Like that seems to be your specialty right now.
Yeah.
So
Trying to be.
Trying to be, yeah.
Yeah. So how I got into crypto, how I got into mobile security is because I spent 8 hours on my phone every day, and this thing kept getting hacked. So we got hacked 4 times, personally, and it was a very simple attack, like SIM swap. So people who don't know, people in big stores get bribed. So like AT&T's of the world, and they have people all over, and they have two jobs. One is working in a store. Second job is selling people data. So, so you can buy any call log, any personal information, and ask them to switch the number to. So if you pay someone $5, they will switch the number to a criminal, and criminal use that to get into your account. So that is something was happening to me 4 times. Happened to me 4 times because I was running a Bitcoin ATM, and so this one problem where people were hacking my number, and luckily I was safe, but people use it to get into your account, steal all the money, and that's pretty common. So I realized there's no cell phone service for important people. Like, like I asked what the Bill Gates of the world will use, like, what Elon Musk of the world will use. And I realized none, they use the same thing. That's why we have very high profile celebrities getting hacked left and right. Jack Dorsey got hacked around the same time. And I realized, okay, man, there's no like a first class for business services. Everyone is on the family plan and if you are a multi-billionaire or like, person on the street, you basically have the same cell phone plan. So why there's no business class for cell phones? So I said, is there a need to have a better cell phone plan? Like some cell phone plan that you want to talk to, like every time you have to call AT&T, you don't look forward to talking to AT&T, because you'll be transferred and thrown between department to department. It's not like, oh, I love to talk to my AT&T. So I think they were the customer satisfaction because they were built for the masses, and we don't expect them to. Their goal is to provide cheaper cell phone service to as many people as possible. So that was the brain behind it. I never thought it would be business, to be honest, because I thought that it's such a stupid idea that people should be able to do this. Like, and I think this problem will be solved in a few months. So my goal was start up a company, and then AT&T will figure it out, and or Verizon will figure it out and say that, okay, we'll just solve this problem because this is such easy problem to solve.
Mhm.
And the more I learned, I realized how hard it is to solve. And the simple problem for that was it's not a revenue driver for anyone. If someone get hacked, it doesn't lose money to the carriers. And the biggest example is T-Mobile. As Christmas comes every year, T-Mobile get hacked every year. Like the tax season, there's a hack season. So T-Mobile is getting hacked left and right. They don't have zero difference in their subscriber base. No one left T-Mobile because they get hacked every 6 months because people want cheap services. The people want better, and they say, oh, this is part of life. So they move on. They get bribed by a new phone, and people accept the bribe, and they keep the service. So they figure out it's better to give people a new iPhone rather than fixing the cybersecurity.
Yeah.
So that's basically what people want, and as a business, they are doing it right. So so I spoke to a lot of companies, and this was like, yes, hacking is a big issue, but it doesn't lose us make money. So it's not like something that gets discovered in our board meetings. So I realized we can still build a nice business around protecting people who care about their cell phone security, and the niche is pretty small. Maybe 1% people care about it to a point where they will actually make a change. No one will say that I want an unsecure cell phone, but would you pay extra $50 for that? Not a lot of people would like to do that. So start off with that. Our specialty is pretty simple. We guarantee SIM swapping. We provide better customer service, and we make sure if something goes wrong, we cover you $5 million insurance policy, similar to like LifeLocks of the world have done, or like identity theft protection. Because I believe my telephone number is more important than a social security number.
Mhm.
So that's pretty much the rationale. And when I was working on Bitcoin ATMs, we realized that our telephone number have more information on someone than your social security number. If you don't believe me, just go on Google and find out, type your telephone number. There's a chance you'll find more information about you than your social security number. You know, and that's crazy. There's a lot of tools that do that for you. You put your telephone number, they'll tell you which credit card you have. That's crazy. You can tell them where you live, which houses you had. There are tools built for it. And which social media do you use? So people have anonymous accounts, and they believe they're secure, but the moment they put telephone numbers, you can find someone's social media account, Facebook account, and that is all linked to your telephone number. So rationale behind it: how can I make this boy the most secure thing, which I spend 8 hours of my day? You
Yeah.
know. So this is pretty much how build the company is built around. And now, how to stay in a relevant industry? It's very. I always was as an entrepreneur, I was always thinking, scared about. You always have a platform risk about, like, you're building business or a company, and company can shut you down anytime. You build business on Facebook, and Facebook can say, today we revoke your API and you're done. So your entire empire of can collapse in a day, and it can happen to us too, right? Like, and but I realized, I spoke that there will always be a niche of people who want to be more secure. So we don't go after AT&T and T and Verizon and say, you guys are bad. I just think that it's a different market. And the market is like Brabus. You have Mercedes and you have Brabus. People buy Mercedes, people who want more, they go for Brabus. It's the same car, it's just better infrastructure, better brakes. You have Brembo brakes, you have bulletproof cars. You can go Rolls Royce and convert it into bulletproof. So we are the company who provide bulletproof. Not everyone needs bulletproof, but we work with companies to take off their liabilities. So we are actually a better for these companies because we take off the liability from them
Yeah.
in a way that they can pass on the high risk customer to us, so we can manage them. And now the same 1%, they can get rid of 1% customer, and their cybersecurity budgets have to go to like zero almost. So that's how we approach the business.
It's an interesting use case. Like I don't know if I've ever heard anyone actually explain it in that same way, right? Like when it comes to security around the mobile devices specifically, right? Like is that they're not built for they're not. I mean, they're built with security in mind, but numbers specifically, like social security numbers back in the day, are used for authentication and authorization, but were never really intended for that purpose, right? It's intended to be the device that, or the mechanism by which someone contacts you, right? That's it. But then we've layered on all of these other features on top of it, which were never intended. And we didn't think about security back in the day when there was a switchboard, right? Like it was just, hey, we're doing manually switching. Now it's automated, and now it's mobile, and we've got wireless devices, and we have to still be able to do the same sort of switching. So there's SIM cards involved, and it allows for the attackers and those edge cases to be found to actually take those numbers over. So it's an interesting, kind of thought process about how we got to this point, that these attacks actually exist. And then also, hey, we're validating social media logins through SMS messages or bank logins or whatever else. Like it sounds like the ATM switch, the Bitcoin ATM stuff was the initial one for you. But was it all like, do you feel like most of those targeted attacks are because of being a high value or a high,
Yeah.
I guess a high value target, right?
So it depends, right? Like I'll give you example like about myself. I'm a high target. Like obviously I'm secure myself, but people can actually want to go into my accounts and everything. What I've seen is there's also a sweet spot about like people who do not know anything, like senior citizens, or who do not have apps, like they don't know about security, right? So they are like, a lot of people would not use Authy or like, hardware key, and they may have $20,000 in the bank account, and they think no one can come after it, and they will attack those people because they have absolutely zero security practice. They'll be using Yahoo email with no password, right? Or like really shitty password, or their password has been breached a lot of times. So there's also that people too, because again, it all comes down to ROI. Some person you can spend like 5 minutes and hack $20,000. That's the better ROI than you can spend 1 year in cracking the system. So high value targets normally have spent money on cybersecurity, but generally the lower targets have not spent any money. So if you ask them, hey, you should switch to Ishfani, they say, no, I'm on a family plan that I don't know who owns. They would like to say $20 per month in return for a very bad apps of security. So yes, there is, but a lot of people will be like, deprived of 10, 20, and you go to, you lose $20,000. Trust me, no one even cares about you losing even $100,000. So if you go to FBI, they'll say, that case does not work for us. So they are left with nothing. They cannot spend lawyers. They can't do anything. I have friends who have highly value targets, and they lost like millions of dollars, and they were able to recover some of the money because they were able to spend money on lawyers. But if you lose $20,000, no lawyer have interest in your business because they know the settlement is not going to cost you. No police want interest because they're not in a budget for it, and FBI will not even take your case.
Yeah, so it's only when it gets to be those huge amounts, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, and I think we've seen the same sort of attacks happen uh, in the malware space or the ransomware space,
Yeah.
right? Like they target those companies that are not going to, like, they're going to pay out $20,000
Yeah.
pretty easily because it's a no brainer, but it's going to hurt them, but it's not the same as going after a huge healthcare organization or something else where the FBI is going to get involved, and you're going to have, you're going to have quite a response that pops out of it. That's
Like
interesting. So
like
yeah,
Lockheed Martin is one of the like a priced like kind of a target. But the moment you get into that, it basically becomes a matter of national security, right? And yes, the target is big, but at the same time you're coming. But like if you run like a small mom and pop shop and you are an architect who have $200,000 in their bank account, no one cares.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, as sad as that is to hear, yeah, you're right. Well, I mean, that's cool. So let's talk a little bit about the technical side of the solution, right? Like, it sounds like you then, provide this layer of security that goes into, preventing SIM swapping. Is there more, like, are you working then with the AT&Ts, T-Mobiles of the world to, prevent that sort of action from happening? How did
Yeah,
you go
yeah.
about researching that?
So in US, like there is three major carriers: AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon. So they are basically our platforms, and they provide the coverage. And so we work is like if you go to like a store, you hear about like 20 different brands on Walmart, and every one of them have the same model. They go to a big carrier, they buy minutes in bulk, and they resell those minutes. Generally, why companies do that is because they actually have a they not only target like very low profile, like someone wants a $10 plan, AT&T doesn't want them in store. It's like credit union stuff, right? They don't want them in the store because Chase only wants a big person walking with a six-figure check, you know. So that's how carriers wanted to offload their traffic, and that's why MVNO were created. Mobile, so Mint Mobile, US Mobile, like T-Mobile, they're Cricket Mobile, Metro. They're like gazillion of them. I think there are 1,000 of them who have access. So to summarize, we do the same thing to we go to these carriers and we just say that give us your minutes. So we buy minutes in bulk and we resell the minutes. We package them together, and rather than targeting like we are the cheapest one, we focus on we are the best one. We are the most secure one. So because of that, we have the option of authentication and everything. So if you are working with us, we actually control if you leave the service or not. So because of that, of Bitcoin ATM experience, we know that with Bitcoin ATM, you can pretty much have dealt or came across any kind of criminal that you can think about. Think about any way of crime people will have applied in crypto. So because of that, you learn a lot of stuff, and that's how I learned about how people can attack our system. So we pretty much that's where relevance comes in. Like tomorrow, what kind of attack will come in? What new techniques are getting involved? So I think there's a stat like 90-95% of the hacks happen because of human error. So we just said that what if there is no human involved in the process, and what if we distract everyone, and what if everyone is criminal? So we made our plan super simple, where you cannot make any change at all, even internally or externally. So that was our recipe to success so far, is that no one can make any changes. So we apply the same thing as crypto happens, like someone is trying to hack your crypto wallet. So, but because we don't offer anything else, like we only have one plan, one price. So people only call us, I want to leave the service. That's pretty much about it, which happen
Uh-huh.
rarely. So other than that, we just say we don't have anything, so you cannot make any changes. So we are able to afford very high level of authentication that other companies cannot do that. So other company, you want to call in and you don't want to wait for 2 days to make a change in your cell phone plan. You don't make like a 7 days to get a new phone, right? In our case, you have to wait because there's no other way of work around it.
Yeah.
So we can afford it to do things that a traditional company cannot do. It's not very scalable, but it works out well for us. Like our
Yeah.
customer is not saying, "Hey man, I'm getting $20 off on this plan. Can you give me an offer?" We have zero retention department. So uh, so uh, so again, same multi-signature process that we follow in crypto, we follow the same in our industry, and we build a business around it. It's
Cool.
a niche product. It's like very very only for special people, and we tell people that There's a reason why we are not for you. And I say this to everyone, like, we are not for you. We only work for the important people. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a white glove service, right? And
Yeah.
and I think like we have these discussions like in the security space quite a bit, right? Like, I think about, and Ken, correct me if I'm wrong from your end too, as you've been internal more, but I know like when I start talking to companies, like I always ask that, what's your primary motivator here, right? Are you looking for like real security, like you want to solve all the security problems that are in your code, or you've got like a compliance check, right? Like that you have to, you're being forced to do this and you're just looking for what's the cheapest price that I can get X accomplished at, or, like, because there is like, it depends on that kind of interaction to determine whether or not someone is willing to spend for the white glove service, right? And I think that's what you're getting at, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like, a lot of times, security is something that you don't think about from a different. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, when I get a flight, I normally look for cheapest price. You look at, okay, there's the Delta and there's United going on, in the same direction, and they're almost similar. One is half the price. I don't look at which one is the safer flight. You just assume that every airline is safe, right? You don't expect that. And similar to the same concept applied in cell phone too. People don't expect that XYZ service is basically uh, more secure than other service. And that's why, like, T-Mobile is the biggest example. Like, the more they get hacked, the more revenue they get, because people do not care.
Yeah.
So I think they have been hacked like 8 times in last 5 years, and so it's more than Christmas. But at the same time, the revenue, if you look at their revenue, is growing every month. So general public do not care. So why don't we focus on people who do care and just focus on the niche?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's great, right? Like it's a good model to have. Yeah. I mean, if you look at breach data, right? Like that was the most recent one from T-Mobile was
Yeah. 37
January.
million. Yeah,
Yeah.
37 million or
37
something.
million accounts. And it was an API that was actually, I mean, that was data in that case, right? That somebody was retrieving back, but that's always the difficult proposition, right? It becomes a watering hole. It makes sense for an attacker to go after T-Mobile, or like the more customers that they have, the more data that exists there.
And actually, it's worse for us. So in cybersecurity, I say that every time, like, it's not a win when any company get hacked, frankly. Like, if a smaller company get hacked, like, they have now more power, more arsenal to come after us. It's basically, the more hackers are empowered, the more weaker we become. It's like, giving money to criminals. Yes, today they took a ransomware for someone. Now they have more resources to find against us, and it's just a matter of time they'll come after us. And this is something that is we're only good till we are not hacked. One day you're hacked and you're done. So that is something that I'm scared of too. Like, I'm afraid of, because I could be good, but I don't know what I'm missing. So every time, same thing comes with relevance, that maybe there are things that someone right now will be trying to hack me, because they say, man, this guy's on the phone, let me try to hack him, you know? And so that, as a CEO, it basically scares me. And also, it's the biggest fear in our business. It's not about losing customer, not about competition. It's about we losing our single proposition, which is security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I mean, it makes sense, right? Yeah, I don't know, Ken. Like, what questions do you have around like SIM swapping and the other mobile security issues?
There were other things mentioned on the site. We've talked a lot about SIM swapping. There were some other things mentioned. I was more curious about the capabilities of, which were like, because honestly, I've heard about. I forget the name of it. I have to go back to the site. But
IMSI
where you
catcher,
pretend
you
to
may have
be.
heard of IMSI catcher, DNS hijacking, and all those things.
No, the fake tower attacks. That's the
Yeah,
one I
that's
was thinking of
IMSI. So
specifically.
IMSI is basically a fake tower. And
Can you
the
say that
same
again? Sorry, what's that?
IMSI catcher, fake
MC
tower.
catcher.
They're all the same things, right? So it's the same thing. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about how the attacks happen and how it can intercept. Is this something
Yeah,
you're interested in?
a little bit about that, and then I did want to at some point, because I know you posted about Silicon Valley Bank and what
Yeah.
that means. And for those that are listening, your background, yes, you have an engineering background, of course, and yes, you're known for mobile security, but also you're an entrepreneur. You helped with the Y Combinator startup stuff, like the incubation. It sounded like, or at least the some part of that. And I know that you for sure have thoughts on the Silicon Valley Bank bit. So, anyways, I wanted to hear a little bit about that as well after we get into just a brief kind of breakdown on the fake tower attacks and
Yeah, sure.
eavesdropping and how you sort of
So SIM swapping is the most easy one. There are like hundreds of types of attacks that can happen, right? There's SQL injection happen where there DNS manipulation. There could be like phishing attack is pretty common where you get like you have a packet from FedEx. You click on it and it allows you to enter your password or something. That's pretty common. Or you visit a website. So fake tower is a very sophisticated attack. It doesn't happen to a lot of people. It's very expensive to carry out because a lot of them happen because of zero-day vulnerability attacks on mobile, and I can cover zero-day vulnerability too. But anyways, fake tower is basically as I have Wi-Fi. Like I'm living in a house, and because the house is big, you have multiple Wi-Fi extenders. Similar to that, like we have towers where you can replicate an existing tower and turn into like your mobile will connect to the strongest tower. So someone can install a device in your house which will basically act as just a signal booster. We have signal boosters. I don't know if people know that, but you can install a signal booster in your house to get better signals. So you can have a signal booster which acts rogue. What it does, it basically for cell phone tower, it acts as your cell phone, and from cell phone, it acts as your tower. So whatever traffic it gets, basically send one part to the tower, but other part goes towards, toward the hacker. So they can listen to your call, they can intercept your text message, they can do everything they want. And that happens. It's not an easy attack to happen. It's very expensive to conduct because first of all, you need physical access to someone, proximity of someone. And the second thing, equipment is very expensive and cost to conduct it is pretty high too. Like you have to literally physically go and be close to someone and monitor it, and it's highly illegal. And if caught, it could be like SIM swappers. It's not a basic thing, but when it comes to this type of attack, it become a matter of national security. So this is the attack that happens. You may hear about. There's also something called location tracking, where people can track someone's location by just a ping. And example of that is where you have to do. We have what do you call? We have Amber Alerts, right? Like you say, someone got kidnapped and everything. So they ping to everyone, regardless of which connection you have and everything. So you can find someone's location just by pinging someone. So that's a very dangerous attack. If you want to kill someone, you want to hurt someone, so you can literally find someone's location by being in any country, and that's the most vulnerable attack. Like someone may be sitting in their house and kind of hiding from someone, and you just say, "Ping the tower." It figured it out because think about it. You have expensive arsenal, like tanks going in Ukraine, and Russia can just basically ping them by because everything is cellular. And they can pinpoint where the person is, or they can kill the person. So it's very risky. So again, I'm happy to go into that, but that becomes very, very, boring discussion for a lot of people. But ultimately, someone can find your location, someone can listen to your call if they have the money to spend. So that's about those towers. And now coming back to the point of, I built a Bitcoin ATM machine. One of the co-founded one of the Bitcoin ATM machine. We have like 10,000 location, 500,000 clients. And we went to Y Combinator, which is the best incubator in the world, like Stanford for startups. Very hard to get in. So that's my background. My name literally means accountant. So my name is accountant. So obviously, I have a lot of interest in finance, and I don't think so of any person in the world who says I don't have interest in money. So obviously, Silicon Valley Bank is something because a lot of my friends have an account there, and I'm a victim of one time I lost a lot of money in exchange. Where money was sitting there. So I feel that how the pain that you have to go through when you lose money. Like one day you're sitting and next day you have nothing. So it's not because of fault of yours. Basically, it's not like you bought a house and it went burned into fire. It's just basically you putting money somewhere and you believe it was safe and it's not safe anymore. So I think the government action right now is pretty good. That it's they came up and they pretty much bailed out and guaranteed everyone. And I think people may have, oh, you are bailing out the capitalism and everything. But I think that's a wrong approach because imagine if Americans believe that the money is not safe in any bank, like, I think that's that's very wrong. Like, how can you have same kind of mindset where I'm just sitting my money in I'm putting my money in a bank and I don't have time to look into the bank is safe or not, right? It's like you getting into plane and the plane crash and you say, oh, you should have checked if the plane was serviced properly. I don't have time for that, right? So I think financial system, whenever there's a bank on the street, regardless, you can think about the bank could be like expensive, the bank could be not good quality service, the person could be rude, but the money is safe. Whenever you want to walk into any bank anywhere in the US, you understand the money is safe, and that's the most trust that was being lost, confidence. And but it's not over yet, and the reason why it's not open right now, like I had money sitting in Chase account for 0%, you know and now I can just transfer them in one click and transfer it to 5%. So now my money that I took out from Chase Bank can go into 5%. Now Chase doesn't have that money anymore, so they have to pick up their whole, so they have to borrow at 0% from someone. And if they don't have enough borrowers, then they have a liquidity issue because the banks have collaterals and they have to maintain the collateral, which so there could be a bank run. Like if tomorrow everyone says that even 15% of any banker says that we want money out, they don't have the money. And so the more people want to take out the money, the system can collapse, and it's a ripple effect. It's basically people lining up against the panic thing. We follow social proof. So if Seth calls, like his friend Jesse, I'm just going. Oh, what are you doing? I'm just taking out my money. Jesse may run to the bank too, and Jesse may call John that, hey man, you want to take out your money too. And within minutes, like this entire collapse happened in literally in 30 hours. So it's like a TikTok. It could be a TikTok trend. Like and this is very dangerous from a attack point of view. Like think about Russia. Like again, I'm just taking example because they have algorithms, or China can say tomorrow that I'm just basically showing every American a video of people withdrawing money from their bank account, and they have the algos to do that. Now everyone start rushing to the bank, and this thing can just blow up. And within days, our system can financially totally collapse.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on so many things there. I think one of the things that like obviously we know the FDIC exists to provide that coverage in the case of a bank failure, but that's a singular sort of scenario. You're talking about a mass run on withdrawals from every banking institution, major banking institution, and then that being kind of the overwhelming catalyst for just mass bank financial failure, really. And that's so that's a really interesting. I know that there are a lot of banks that fed off of Silicon Valley Bank, and so there were a lot of tech founders in a really weird spot until the Treasury kind of stepped in and stated, hey, here's what, and I know that for me, who is a tech founder, co-founder, we did some things to move money around in ways to like protect ourselves, diversify a bit. But I realized during that as well that man, what a right time for scammers to send spam messages. And I think your product at this point then is well placed for text messages like, hey, did you really just open this new bank account? Or hey, can you verify this to make sure that bank account's still going to be able to receive deposits, or whatever it might be. I definitely feel like we're going to see an uptick, and in terms of the mobile side of things, it sounds like you've got a solution that can help there quite a bit. So are you feeling pretty good though overall? It sounds like you are with the response that the Treasury provided.
It is, but you have to understand, like a lot of things. Basically, the show is not over, right? I think they stopped it, but like if you look at First Republic, the bank stocks is down like 70. I haven't watched today, but 70% down. And every time it goes down, the collateral requirement changes. It's a dominant effect, right? Like you have to collateral requirement. A lot of them is stocks, and I don't agree to the point of because what happened is there's one issue that happened. The investors were wiped out. If I'm an investor, like investor is not like someone who's running the CEO, but investor could be like a pension fund who have money sitting in a bank, in a stock. Like you would like to buy Chase stock because this is the most safest stock in the world. You can say that, right? And if I don't trust in Chase Bank stock, then obviously they have a liquidity issue. They are all like, interlinked. I know it's a very popular decision to say that, hey, let's wipe off all the stocks owners, right? It's very, very, it's very popular that, hey, man, we killed the rich people and we saved the poor people, you know. But ultimately, the stocks are not just owned by rich people; they're also owned by poor people as well. So what about the guy who had a stocks of SVP as a retirement fund? He got wiped out too. So he may be thinking about it. So I think the response is good. I'm just worried about this treasury high rates. Like, why would someone have incentive to put money in 0%? And the challenge becomes that it's not the big boys who will suffer, it's smaller banks, like regional banks, who will be suffering because they don't have collateral. They are basically ultimately inflation is an issue. I believe inflation is a massive issue, and I think that we're still recovering from COVID issue, and then we have war that's been funded for at a rate that is we could have done much better things at home. So I'm politically against wars, and I believe that we have bigger security risk than just killing someone. So like TikTok is a massive issue. Like I just think that they can run a trend and destroy things. Cybersecurity is a big issue. That in cybersecurity, only because there are no bombs around it, like no missiles flying around it, doesn't mean that or no bullets. It doesn't mean that we are not at war. We are at a war from an enemy that we can't even identify, an enemy they're attacking from their own house without us cannot even reach them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I agree with that. I would say that one bad actor, one well placed, spy or someone with otherwise espionage related goals is much scarier than the damage that can be done with brute force and your traditional ground wars. I think that you're not wrong there. There's a lot of damage that can be done. Actually, there's this Netflix series that I think is kind of talks about some of this called Spycraft. Super interesting. The only reason I bring it up is it actually does kind of break down some of the ways in which one or two people or three people have created massive issues and really compromised the security of the U.S. specifically, and I think maybe Britain might be talked about as well. But anyways, I guess I'm saying there's evidence out there. Totally agree. We're always at war. That war looks a little different. Given. And,
yeah. The thing that I find interesting on that, Haseeb, back to your point about it being, it's this kind of implicit trust that we have that we can walk into a bank and get our money, right? Like, but the influence, like the way that that sector works is that the liquidity just isn't there to support everyone pulling out all their money at the same time, right? And then all the conditions behind the scenes with the interest rates and how those banks are actually trying to spread and make money with the deposits that they have so they can cover the whatever percent interest rate that they put in a savings account, right? Like it all kind of feeds into it. So you see how it happened logically, but it's really difficult to see how to protect against that sort of thing outside of, guess what? Those that are in charge of those banks probably have to have some sort of a protection against that, right? And like, I don't want to get into the politics of everything that's happened and like the regulations that are there, but my main point was the trust issues that we have. And right, like we're also influenced by social media as it is. Like I know that I know that everyone in my circles are. So you see something on TikTok, on Instagram that causes you to have trust issues, then it feeds into this loop of, hey, I'm going to go get my money out and I'm going to tell other people to get their money out. And then all of a sudden Silicon Valley Bank goes down because everybody that I knew was founders and they all were trying to withdraw, millions, if not billions of dollars out of the bank all at the same time. And of course they can't cover that liquidity, and bam, this is what happens, right? This is the end result. So when that feeds into other places, and like if we can take advantage, or if someone can take advantage of those trust issues that we have, right? Like you can see it cascading, and that's where I think you were saying that it's not done at this point, right? There still may be others that happen.
Yeah, and also like it's about like it reminds me of COVID days, right? Like we were running out of supplies all the time because people said, "Oh, there's no supplies in the stores." People were buying overbuying, and because of overbuying, there was more shortage, and because of more shortage, people were buying more. And this is all impact of like like I live in Puerto Rico, and what happened is that we had a hurricane like maybe 5 months ago or something, and there was no gas because people were buying extra gas, and the extra gas basically created more shortage, and because of more shortage, people are buying even more extra. So there was enough for everyone, but people panicked, and that's the same thing can happen in a bank run. That's pretty much classic bank run. And in the past, there was like you can like limit because how many people can run to the bank right now. But if it's online, I can be literally anywhere in the world and just click a button and take out like $1 million. In the past, it would like people are carrying like cash suitcase, so they cannot take out like $10 million. But now they can with a click they can, and it's much easier to call the bank run.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, what sort of protections they put into place, and how they actually limit withdrawals when it comes down to it. Because I mean, that was the traditional. You're right. Like physical, it was a lot easier to be like, "Hey, guess what? We're only going to let people withdraw a couple $100s at a time."
Yeah.
But yeah, digitally, that's not that same restriction is just going to maybe even cause more panic or more people to try and withdraw. Right.
Yeah, now ultimately everything comes down to trust, right? I trust, like, you trust that your phone will work, you trust that this recording will go up, and that's how the trust is. But if the trust is not there, there's a massive cost of trust. And I talked this about, like, look at like our airport security. There's a trust that people can be criminal. There's no trust, right? So we have to spend hours and hours in line that we'll be spending in something over. So our cost of flying has gone up because you have to spend extra money on because no, there's a lack of trust. Imagine there's no checking on the airport because we trust that everyone is a good person and we just pass by. We can probably save like maybe billions of dollars every year. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever there's a lack of trust, the cost goes high. That's why the cost of lending to people with subprime, credit score is higher because you don't trust them that they will return the money, so their cost is higher. A
Mm-hmm.
similar goes in any industry. Whenever there's a lack of trust, the cost goes up.
Yeah.
And if you have a very good credit score, there's more trust, you will return the money. Your interest rate is good, perfect, you can survive. But lower the trust rate, higher the interest rate, it's all a cascading. So the same goes with the banking system. So I hope we have a massive trust in our banking, which is pretty much very low right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it'll be interesting to watch, right? It has been the last few days, and like I do like being in the West, like in the Western U.S. I do know some people that work at or worked at Silicon Valley Bank. Now
Yeah.
they're working for a different entity and not at like an executive level. And it's been interesting to talk to them about the situation because they have nothing to do with hey, we have these whatever, like the mortgage-backed securities or whatever that the company is buying, and like all those decisions, they're more on the IT security side of things. And from that perspective, everything looks like kind of business as usual, or it did up until Friday. And they got this email that was like, "Oh, and we are now done," and taken over
Yeah.
by the FDIC. And so, like, my heart goes out to those because that's where it hits. That's where it becomes a reality for a lot of people that aren't necessarily in those decision making roles or in other places, because it's going to affect their livelihood on a daily basis.
And I'm sure that you may have friends who are basically, they're the common bankers are evil, right? They're the kind of a taboo around banking. Like, oh, every banker, like they work on Wall Street, they live in a penthouse, or they are basically driving like a Rolls Royce or something. And they are, but not actually, a lot of bankers are really helpful, right? Like, if you don't have bankers, the financial system can collapse, right? Like I didn't take a mortgage from Silicon Valley Bank, or never banked with them personally, but they helped a lot of my friends. And I don't know why people are happy over a bank going down. I think this is worse that one thriving business have gone down. We have less people to support our ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah, it does, right? Like it does reduce the effectiveness and the options that we have to actually go get loans, or as tech founders, to actually have a service that is, or a bank that is focused on providing services specifically to VC funds and other places, right? Like, so it does change the landscape. um Yeah, I mean, it's all just, pretty interesting how it, like, even though it is banking, it's affected, security and everything else that goes into our world.
Absolutely. So again, we shouldn't celebrate someone fall down, right? I think we should basically celebrating. This is not a moment of proud to be. This is a moment of to reflect and to support each other businesses. And everyone among you, we all depend on each other. If you go down, I'll go down. Maybe not today, maybe tomorrow.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it's a good way to think about it, right? Like in general, when breaches happen or security issues happen or banking issues, like in this case, there is a tendency to, we want to know the dirty details because it's interesting to see how the attacks happens, how the breaches happen, but we do have a tendency to celebrate that they had an issue or whatever it is without realizing that it does affect us, and like it could be us next, right? Like
Well,
it's
absolutely.
Yeah.
And if they didn't come after us this way, maybe we got lucky, but tomorrow they're getting more power. They have more money to spend on breaking us, right? They have more arsenal to them tomorrow. And again, we only stand together if we're together. You and I, we represent part of US, so we have to hold each other so as a country we can progress.
Yep. Well, good. Well, we do want to be cognizant of the time, Haseeb. Like, thank you for jumping on. Sorry, we had like some miscommunications on, setting up the stream and everything like that. But it's been interesting to think through both the mobile security and the SVB stuff. Is there any place that people can meet you or can come talk to you more? Like, how would someone reach out to you?
So I've already joined your Slack group, so they can find me always there, right?
Awesome. Okay.
So that's like, you can post your group, but otherwise we are afani.com. You can type Afani CK Mobile. I'm pretty active on Twitter as well. My Twitter handle is Haseeb, HASEEB. And that's pretty much easier way to find out. They want to email me, haseeb@afani.com. That's pretty simple. But otherwise I'll be active in your Slack, so anyone can ping me there. So that's
great.
Easiest way to find me.
I know there's going to be some questions on some of those technical attacks too, right? Like we didn't get into a lot of that today, but I know we do have quite a few, especially kind of on the, the mobile app side of things. Like we do a lot of that, and like specifically from the application side of things.
Yeah, sure.
Ken, any other final questions or thoughts before we call it for today?
No, just appreciative of your time. So thank you for hopping on and sharing your knowledge and your time.
Yeah. Good. All right, then. Outside of that, like I said, this specific episode was or is sponsored by Redpoint Security. Reach out to them for application security needs, and otherwise, we will see everyone next week. And I think that's it, Ken. Unless you got something else.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.
Bye bye.